Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our this week's class about avatars and presence in the metaverse. We have two fantastic lecturers today. Our first one, I want to introduce Athena Demos. Athena has a long track record of many projects that she is heading, and the last one that I found very inspiring, interesting, is around the Burning Man festivities. And during COVID, I think there was a lot of experimentation going on, and she hosted this amazing community in a virtual environment, and that's just very inspiring. So I'm so happy to have her speaking in this class and share her experiences with us.
Hi, thanks so much. I just want to check audio's good. Everybody can hear me. We're okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I see some thumbs up. Wonderful. Yeah, so we sort of came into existence because of COVID, because we needed a place to gather. We weren't able to have Burning Man. So my company really came into existence merely as a call for the immediate need of us to gather. And since that time, because we were so successful with community building, we did a lot of work for Microsoft or the UN Youth Council called Yanga, or other companies. We've done social impact projects like Brianna's Garden and Pride Has No Borders, or even CricketVerse for the European Cricket Network and SES. And all of these are all about people coming together. But in order for us to come together, we have to be individuals first. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is having a sense of presence through avatar embodiment. Because through avatar embodiment, when you feel as if you are yourself and you're expressing yourself the most that you possibly can, then you feel like you can also be part of a community. So I am going to share my screen because let's see, share, there we go, slideshow, look at that, isn't that amazing? So what I want to talk to you today is, how do we do that? How do we have this sense of presence that allows us to be community together? So in recent years, with the advancements of technology, they have enabled us to create these amazing virtual environments and experiences that feel increasingly real, even when they're total fantasy. With the rise of virtual reality and social media platforms, users are increasingly able to embody avatars and engage with others in digital spaces. And today we will explore the concept of avatar embodiment, its connection, and to having a sense of presence in that digital space. But first, I want to talk about some factors that contribute to having a sense of presence. Because that's like, what does it mean to have a sense of presence? By the way, you'll notice I talk a lot with my hands. I am very expressive, even on this little 2D screen. The more time I have spent in VR, the more expressive I have become, because I need to express myself through my avatar. And at the end of my presentation, I'll tell you some secrets about how to do that. So in order to have a sense of presence, it gives you a feeling of being there. A sense of presence can be defined as being present in a virtual environment, a video game, social experience, even a teleconference like this. So some factors that contribute to having that sense of presence is being immersed. That's why I like putting on the VR headset and just immersing myself. Because the degree at which the environment is immersive can significantly impact your sense of presence. For example, a highly realistic and detailed environment that you recognize can create a greater sense of presence than a low fidelity one. So in the bottom corner, you'll see on the slide, you'll see, it looks like a picture of Black Rock City, but that's actually BRCvr. That's the digital version. We created a digital version to create a sense of normalcy to welcome the burners home. It needs to have interactivity. So that's the ability to interact with the environment or other virtual entities, other people will give you a sense of presence. And the more control that you have over yourself and the environment will make you feel like you're actually there. And we had people say to us all the time, I was there, I was at Burning Man. The community even created a hashtag called This Burn Counts. It was adorable. Sensory input. The more senses that are engaged with your experience, the more immersive it will be. So now I'm in Austin right now, and I was at South by Southwest, and I was blown away at the way people created sensory input. One of my favorite was one called Forager, where you put on a VR headset and you were a mushroom spore, and you're going to go through the life cycle of a mushroom spore. But you're lying down in a beanbag chair that had haptics in it. So you could feel the rumble of the earth as the mycelium was spreading out. And then they had a fan blowing on you and you could smell the forest floor. You could smell the rotting decay of leaves and wood and that earthiness. And I felt like I was a mushroom spore because of all this sensory input. Social cues are also another way that you get this sense of presence. The presence of other people in a virtual environment can also contribute to that sense of presence. Social cues such as eye contact, body language, facial expressions, they all give you that feeling that this is very real and having a shared experience in those environments, which is why immersive social VR is so important. Altspace in particular had very special avatars. The eyes would actually follow the person who was speaking. So even if you didn't want to make eye contact, if you had some form of social anxiety and it was difficult for you to make eye contact, your avatar's eyes would always make eye contact with the person who was speaking, which means that person felt like you were connecting with them. So energetically, they would then connect with you and you would get that feeling of human connection. So it gave people that were neurodivergent an opportunity to feel like a true part of a community and have human connection without the confrontational feelings that come from social interaction. I just found that absolutely amazing. And by the way, don't go looking for Altspace. It doesn't exist anymore. It was sunset on Friday. And sadly, those wonderful avatars are gone. Also, how the mouth moved. There were 3 different movements with the mouth, and they cycled through, I think, on a random pattern, and that was enough to make it feel like you were actually speaking. I think in a way, it was mimicking The Simpsons. That animated television show also did something very similar with their mouth movements. A narrative. So if you play video games, you go through a narrative. That narrative, if it's compelling enough, will give you a sense of presence within the story. If a virtual environment has a well-developed story, it can draw you into the experience and make it more real. You become one of the characters. And with BRCvr, one of the things we did is create environments that told a story. But as you interacted with the environment, you went from storytelling into story living, which is something Kent Bai brought up this past weekend at his talk at South by. And I just loved the way he said that. And then realism. The more closely the virtual environment matches the real world, the more likely you are to feel a sense of presence within it. So if the virtual environment replicates the real world location, such as a city, a forest, Black Rock City, even the temple, the man, your office, we created the Microsoft offices that were in New York so that the employees could come and work remotely, but still have the sense of being together in their own offices. This can all increase your sense of presence. Now, what are the benefits and the drawbacks of avatar embodiment? Well, the benefits, the immediacy, that increased immersion. Immediacy is one of the principles of Burning Man, and I often talk through the principles because I think they're very important as a foundational fabric for creative collaboration to thrive. And as I talk about these benefits and these drawbacks, the principles came to light, that you have this increased immersion, that an avatar embodiment can increase your immersion in a virtual environment and create a greater sense of presence. That you can radically express yourself, have that enhanced sense of self-expression. Avatar embodiment allows its users, which I don't like calling anybody a user, that's for addicts, we're participants, to express ourselves in ways that might not be possible in the physical world. Maybe you're very shy and you're an introvert. Maybe you just want to wear black all the time and you don't want to shine and draw attention to yourself in the physical world, but you might have more opportunity to do so in the virtual one. I know that there's a lot of people that go to Burning Man that radically express themselves because they feel safe in that space, but they do not feel safe in the default world. So this can enhance people's sense of self and allow for self-expression and experimentation, which is really important. Play is one of the most important elements of learning about yourself and having self-awareness. And now communal effort, which is also one of the principles. You have this increased social interaction. So avatar embodiment can facilitate social interaction in virtual environments. It can provide opportunities for people to meet and interact, form relationships with others from all over the world. That center picture, that was so much fun. We were running around world hopping and a whole bunch of people showed up all dressed like Mario. Female Marios, male Marios, whatever Marios, it was absolutely adorable. And they were all from Spain. And that was their way to have a sense of community while expressing themselves in this common character. Sometimes we would have everybody change your hair to an afro or everybody change your hair to pigtails. And that gave us a sense of community and radically expressing ourselves as a collective. And then participation. You have this increased ability to participate. You can all dress alike, you can all dress differently. Avatar embodiment can provide opportunities for people with disabilities or physical limitations to participate in activities that might not be possible in the physical world. One of the things I loved was being able to fly in alt space. And I remember during, I think it was the very first virtual burn, there was a gentleman who was in a wheelchair. And I don't know if it was permanent or temporary or what, but I remember him telling me that he was in a wheelchair and that he loved flying because it gave him this sense of mobility that he hadn't had for such a long time. Even just walking around the playa with the thumb joysticks, but just grabbing that flight tool and flying around helped him have a sense that he was no longer in his chair. Now I can say all the positive things in the world about being in virtual reality. I personally love it, but we do need to be aware of some of the drawbacks, like disassociation with physical reality. Virtual reality would not exist without physical reality. If you have a VR headset on, but your physical body is still processing the information, we need to drink water. We need to take care of our physical environment. We need to take care of the earth. It's very important. But sometimes we get so embodied in our avatar that it can lead to disassociation from the physical reality and lead to neglect of our physical world responsibilities and relationships. You can't leave that pizza box out forever. You do need to take care of the space that you're in. And then addiction. That avatar and body can be addictive and lead to excessive use of virtual environments, which can be negative consequences on your own physical and mental health. Now, we started not a rule, but a sort of a guideline when we were doing BRCvr, and it was 1 hour in, 1 hour out. If you spend an hour in VR, spend an hour out of VR, and not just out of VR, but like go outside and touch a tree. So if you spend 5 hours in, go for a walk, go spend 5 hours out, like connect in the world and out. Like REI says, opt outside. Unrealistic expectations. Avatar embodiment can create unrealistic expectations of virtual environments, leading to disappointment when the user returns to their physical world. I've had this. We call it VR depression, where you've been in the headset for hours on end. I know when I produce events, sometimes I'm in there for 10 hours. I hate to say that. I have done that. That's a rarity, but it has happened. And I take off my headset and it's a downer. It's like, oh, I got to wash my dishes and I have responsibilities I have to do. And I was having so much fun. And so you can get like a little bit of VR depression. Identity confusion. Okay, I have a little confusion, so much so that I dyed my hair purple to match my avatar. You can see my avatar has gray and purple, and so do I. No. So your avatar embodiment can sometimes lead to identity confusion, where the users start to confuse their virtual identity with their physical one. I had purple hair in VR for 3 years before I decided to finally dye my hair. And I did it just as a joke for Burning Man. And I got so many compliments, I decided to keep doing it. And then misrepresentation. Avatar embodiment can provide opportunities for users to misrepresent themselves or engage in deceitful behavior in the virtual environment, leading to negative consequences to themselves and others. And this isn't just something that happens in the virtual spaces. Like, deceitful people are deceitful people. This is just another tool for them to use to claim to be something that they're not. And it's been happening in chat rooms. It's been happening in the physical world. But this is just another tool that's being used in this way. There are various different types of avatars. VR chat has theirs where you can be anything you want. Spatial has a set. One of the things I liked about AltSpace was that we were all sort of a common character. And so we all felt like we were part of the same tribe, whether our skin was purple or green or yellow. I think socio-normative avatars are very lacking and very limiting. AltSpace avatars were really nice because it was just about body shape. I don't think male and female avatars serve anybody. What your physical gender is doesn't matter in these virtual spaces. And having your skin color have to be the same or similar to skin colors that actually exist in the physical reality, I don't think is important either. But these are things we're creating sense of normalcy so that we can have people be more comfortable and embody their avatars better. And I know we've been practicing with uploading photos and putting them on your face. It's still uncanny valley, but we are getting better. I'm sure when we get to eye tracking and facial tracking, we'll get facial expressions better. But to be honest, I kind of don't want that. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I like the idea of my avatar's eyes making contact, but I am not responsible for that same contact, so that I can rest my eyes. Sometimes I talk to people with my eyes closed when I'm in VR, because the constant light and everything coming in is very tiring, and this gives me a respite. So it's nice having my avatar making the eye contact for me. And by the way, that Ready Player Me avatar, if you go into somewhere, this is what you'll see that I look like in my turquoise suit, which I'm kind of wearing now. That wasn't planned. So I want to also tell you that we have physical avatars. So I spent all this time talking about digital avatars, but this is my physical avatar. How we dress, how we present ourselves, this is our avatar. This is our way of expressing ourselves in the physical world and in the digital world. And sometimes we match ourselves to our community so that we can identify as a whole. And this is what we do at Burning Man. So I told you I was going to give you some secrets about how you can better express yourselves in your avatar. The very first time I put on a VR headset on, I realized all the work that I had done as a clown was going to come back. I used to be in a circus for 4 years. I was a clown, and I did a lot of mask work. And I had to take workshops in mask work. And I learned how to express myself with my voice and with my hands and with my body language, because the mask covers your face. And so how we are as avatars in the virtual spaces is very much the same type of mask work. And it would be a fun workshop to teach, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of information, because actors learn how to convey their emotions, especially like if you're on stage. We do mask work even if you're not going to perform in a mask, you do it so that you can get the emotion across to the people sitting in the back row. So rather than relying on our facial expressions, because the people in the back row can't see your face, we use our body language. And the same approach can be applied to avatar embodiment, as users are often limited in their ability to convey their emotions through avatar facial expressions. And by studying mask work, individuals can develop a deeper understanding of how body language, posture, vocal expression can convey a wide range of emotions and meanings. Now you can learn techniques about using movement and gesture to create a more immersive and engaging experience with others. So an individual may learn to use subtle changes in posture, turn your shoulders a little bit, or move your body from side to side to convey different emotional states. I had a wonderful and moving experience when I was in the temple during the Burn 2020 in VR. And I had a dear friend of mine who had lost his daughter, and it was a very sad experience. And I was able to be present, holding his hands, even though I couldn't touch him, and giving him this sense of presence in a very sad state while we shared our memories and our understandings with each other. And that emotional state was conveyed in a digital space without facial expressions. So ultimately, these techniques and principles of mask work can be highly valuable for individuals looking to embody their avatars and convey their emotions without relying on their facial expressions. And by developing a greater awareness of your body and your voice, you can create a more authentic and engaging avatar experience and deepen your sense of presence in the digital world. And now I want to talk to you about our loss of identity. This is my last piece. We build our identities. We build who we are and we become this character. It's not just pixels or polygons. It's who we are. And people learn to recognize us in the virtual space because of this. And when you lose it, you lose your sense of identity. We all have our virtual worlds from AltSpace. Those were Unity files, and they've been uploaded to all these different platforms. And I've seen our own worlds, and I've seen other people's worlds. But what's missing is those avatars and that sense of identity of who we are in these spaces. And so the responsibility of people who run platforms, they need to understand that they are the key holders to personal identity, to our humanity. And that's a big responsibility. And you can't just pull the plug because you're not making enough money. You need to really, and by the way, I don't know if that's the reason why they were doing it. You really need to think about your responsibility. So if you're going to build a platform or work on a platform, you really got to think of your responsibility to people who attach themselves to these characters that they've created. Don't take them away from them. So thank you. And I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and any of your questions. And this, by the way, is our entire production team from Burn Week 2021.
Athena, thank you so much. That was
You're welcome.
Very interesting, inspiring. You have such interesting perspectives and memories collected that probably many from us learn through you, through what you just presented. And we have made, or many of us have made these experiences. So it's interesting to learn that. And I wonder if we get if we get a conversation rolling. We have a little bit more time, and let's get the class focused into the room as well. Let's see.
Yeah, I would very much love to hear people's thoughts. If anybody had set up an account on AltSpace, what is your feeling of no longer having that avatar? Like, it's really interesting when I talk to other people, that is the #1 thing that they miss the most. It wasn't the worlds, it was the community.
I saw a hand from Daniel somewhere in between. He might have had a question. Daniel, do you want to bring that up? What you had in your mind before?
Sure. Well, actually, I had recognized hand gestures on Zoom by mistake. So anyone was raising my hand. Sorry. But I have questions. I think it was amazing to see what you were able to do in such a specifically difficult time period too. Oh,
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sorry. My question is, what type of team did you put together, and what are some of the server issues, VR streaming issues, the realistic kind of struggle it must have been? If you can give us some insight into how you overcame some of the challenges you might have had for putting together an event like you did, specifically during the confines of the pandemic, I think it would be really interesting to hear a little bit about that. Could share.
Well, we were very fortunate. We had incredible support from Microsoft and from AltSpace. It helped that they were all burners as well, so they had a vested interest. In fact, we asked them to build a Mac client so that we can get the entire Burning Man office, the artists, the DJs, and everyone that was on Mac, which is a lot of people, onto the platform as well for radical inclusivity. And they answered that call, and they made it happen in 2 months. So we were able to do everything we did because we had the support of AltSpace. They were the ones that managed the servers, and the Azure servers are super stable. When we knew we were going to have a lot of people on for specific events, they would boost our server space so that we would be able to serve everyone. And even then, I mean, when we did the virtual burn night, the actual time when the man was burning on the AltSpace platform, we had so many people, and they were all pinging the same world and the same MRE. And it was nothing that AltSpace had ever encountered before. So there were people there in real time making adjustments to how the server was reacting to the avatars. And I wasn't there, like I wasn't sitting in front of the screen. I was in world. I was actually like in VR, in world, making sure the tech was working on the inside while somebody was making sure the tech was working on the outside. But I do know from speaking to them that it was a real-time adjustment as all this information was coming in from all around the globe. So it was very difficult. I think now with the advent of more AI, those tools don't have to be human driven. They can be AI driven. But that is way above my pay grade. Like I don't have a general understanding. I have a general understanding of what AI is capable of, but I don't have an inner workings understanding. But I do think that we'll be able to use AI to help us manage the server, the moment by moment server load that is going to be necessary as more people jump into these virtual spaces. And the more virtual spaces that we make interoperable with each other, we're going to need massive system architecture from companies like Microsoft and Cisco and like these massive companies that deal with server infrastructure. So yeah.
Just to follow up on that. Oh, sorry.
I had no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, Valden, you can go ahead.
Okay, so there's a few dots from previous classes, I think, that are pretty interesting to reflect with you. think in the very first we had the conversation about what is real. We had somebody who met his future wife in a virtual game, and then they even married virtually and physically, and everything mixed and matched. And I think the idea of physical and real is in that class we talked about it, how it's a wrong conversation, because everything is always real. Like right now we're real, we're here, we're spending our time together and we learn about each other. It's real, you know. You don't have to you don't have to touch the surface of what you are and where you are in order to be real there. So I just want to throw that in your direction and learn what you have to say about that.
I agree with you completely. Look, it's called virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, extended reality. It's all reality. So when people say IRL, I'm like, this is IRL. Virtual reality is IRL. It registers in your brain no different. Like, it's not like you have a section of your brain for digital and a section of your memory for physical and a section. It doesn't. You have one memory core that collects it all. And so I call it the physical space and the digital space. Some people call it the meat space. This is the meat, MEAT, meat space, but I call it the physical space and the digital space. And we create worlds in the digital space, we create worlds in the physical space. And it's a lot more accessible and easier to create your world in the digital space than it is to create your world in the physical space. If you think about building a home, I can go in the Unity store and buy a home and stick it up on a virtual world in 20 minutes. And if I want a home in the physical world, I have to hire an architect. They have to design it. We have to take the design to the planning office. They have to get approval. That's going to take at least 18 months. Then you have to make sure you have enough money, and you're going to hire this whole giant crew, and you're going to build a house. And then you got to do electrical and plumbing inspections. And then and then maybe 3 years down the road, you actually have a house. So, you know, we have an accessibility when it comes to the digital space, but there's still a cost. Now you have to pay for server space. You have to have a place where your files are stored. If you're going to do cloud storage, ultimately all of our virtual worlds are going to live in the cloud, and you're going to have to pay for that space. I mean, how much do all of you pay for your digital server, like your Google Drive or your OneDrive or your iCloud or your whatever? You have a lot of files that you're storing somewhere, and those files are your digital identity. And how much are you paying to store your digital identity? These three-dimensional worlds is just a continuation of that. And it's all going to be part of your digital identity. And that, by the way, is like a whole other talk I can do about your digital identity and where we might be going with that.
Katie, there are a lot of hands in the class, so maybe we.
Well, there's a question that I saw pop up really early in the chat. So let me grab that. It says, how are you seeing this tech applied to meetings and conferences? So Teams has started, Microsoft Teams has started integrating avatars into their meetings. They use your camera to do your facial expressions. So if you do use those avatars, it's not like you're turning off your camera, but it can be exhausting having your face in front of you all the time. You know, Zoom exhaustion is very real. And having an avatar there takes that stress away. Having an avatar be you, like I said, people have social anxiety and they don't like having their cameras on. They don't like being on camera. I come from an acting world and a performing world and being on stage, so I don't mind being on camera. I rather enjoy it. But if you just think of like man on a street interview and somebody comes up to you and they have their cell phone and they're like, hey, I want to ask you a question, and they turn on the phone, people freeze. Or they have a camera and they're like, I want to ask you a question, microphone in hand, and you're like, But if the camera was off, they have no problem answering. And that's just, you know, a camera anxiety. But here we are in the age of COVID, and everyone's on these Zoom calls, and this is how classes are happening, and you're being forced into that into that being on camera. And it's causing a lot of anxiety people didn't even realize they had. And it's unhealthy. And I think avatars in the teleconference space is healthy. And it gives you a chance to radically express yourselves. Not everyone has cool clothes like me. So being able to design what you want your clothes to be, like it's hard to go shopping for designer clothes and most people don't sew their own. So easy to do it and have purple hair in a digital space and not have to have it all the time in the physical space. Somebody asked if that Teams function with the avatars is available now. I think so. I don't know if it's available publicly. We had some early access and I don't remember if it got completely rolled out. I think it did if you were paid, if you have a paid office system, you can, but you can also use a program like a MAS, AMAIZE, I think. Hold on. I have it in my ANIMAZE, ANIMAZE. So you can go to Animaze and set up an avatar, and then it becomes a camera you can select. And oh, I don't have it on though, so you can't see my avatar. Sorry, I'll go back. And that allows you to have that avatar be there, and it will be integrated with your webcam. Snap, I think also you can do it with Snap camera. There's probably others, probably Ready Player Me. I don't know, you'll have to ask Timu when he comes onto the call, but you might be able to have Ready Player Me. Yeah, but there are ways of doing it. But Teams is building, Microsoft's building something called Mesh, and Mesh is going to integrate with Teams and allow you to have your avatar in Teams as well as in Mesh. Mesh is probably about 3 years out though. Oh, thank you for that link. Awesome. You guys are on it. Okay.
I have a different question that's not so much about the avatars, even though I totally agree with you that people feel such an affinity to such a character that designed themselves, that they feel like they can represent themselves truly in the world that doesn't exist maybe in the meat space. Actually, I was lucky enough to go to Burning Man and actually visited one of the stations where they set up the portal where you can talk with people in VR while at Burning Man, which is absolutely crazy because, you know, the Wi-Fi is unstable and there's lots of dust. And I happened to be friends with one of the people who were on the production team that actually captured all of the things that people have built, including the cars, everything. And as you know, Burning Man is a very ephemeral thing and it only lasts for a week, the city itself. I'm curious if you could share some insights on the community aspect and, talk about how people really felt like they were part of this community, but then, the physical thing disappears after a week, but the virtual thing could exist forever, given if Unity is supported by whatever platform, Altspace or all other alternatives. Could you share a little bit more about on the community side, and also especially given that Burning Man is such a unique community in of itself?
Well, I'm so glad you got to experience the window. That was an incredible art project that I did with Sultan and Ian and Rishi, and they were just amazing. The window was a project that was basically a TV screen in portrait mode at the physical burn. People at the physical burn could walk up to the television. There was like I think it was a basic Logitech webcam, and you would be on camera projected into the virtual space. The virtual playa, people could walk up to the virtual camera and be projected onto the screen on the physical playa. And if the two people met, what we call the digital avatar and the physical avatar, you could have a conversation across the metaverse. And it was called the window. And yes, the dust, actually, I was amazed. The dust did not really affect the camera and the television and the electronics as much as we thought it would. It was more power as the power dipped and as the internet dipped, as those signals went up and down. That affected the experience more than the dust did. The television survived quite well. I felt like writing a letter to, I think it was a Samsung, writing a letter to them and just being like, good job. but it was very dusty and the dust was always blowing. But that was a great project, connecting the physical and the digital worlds together. And very much you had a sense of a digital avatar and a physical avatar. So that was really cool. And then we went to Burning Man in 2022 to film the art that we had in 2020 and 2021, all those models. We wanted to capture that and the artists at Burning Man in 2022. And so we're combining it all into one immersive experience called the BRCvr Immersive Documentary Experience. And what it is the 3D models in a fully navigable world that you can walk around and explore. And you come upon orbs, which we call story spheres. And the story spheres are edited videos of that art piece or of a story of community or, you know, whatever it happened to be. The art piece facing the fear beast or the temple. We got lots of footage of the temple or the man or the Circle of Doors tarot. And you can get together with your friends, just like you did on AltSpace, go on adventures, find these orbs, go in them, be immersed at Burning Man in this experience, and then come out of the orb and be there with your friends, having had this shared experience and have a conversation about what you just did. And then ultimately in the future, we'll be able to host the virtual burn in this environment. So we'll have the bubbles, but we'll also have artist talks with artists and avatars like we did with Reburn. We'll have DJs, we'll have meditations and other interactivity like tea ceremonies and stuff like that. There will be a lot of fun to do in the virtual space, bridging them. And ultimately someday I would love to expand the window project so that it's not just flat screen, but that we actually have a 360 bubble or several of them all over the playa. You could walk around the digital playa and come upon bubbles of the physical playa happening live. And then I guess on the playa, you would have AR to see the avatars that are in VR, and the VR would see the people that are there in the bubble. And technology's not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
I have a follow-up question to what you're just unveiling. 2 weeks ago, we had somebody from Sony CSL talking about what he called superception. The idea that with these technologies, you're able to project yourself into multiple physical representations or have inputs from multiple different places in which you could be. And when you talk about meditations in VR space, do you have any like experience or anything that you witnessed for like out of body or multiplying your senses? You know, this kind of space. I feel like that's something that's out there, and that's probably you could have a perspective on.
Well, once we activate more senses. Like right now, we're relying a lot on our eyeballs. This is all eyeball driven. And if you're visually impaired, you're being left out. And that's not fair. We started working with a group called the Blind Burners, trying to create other ways in which virtual spaces could be adapted for people that are visually impaired, like sound navigation, footsteps. You know, it's something so simple that in video games, you always hear your footsteps, but in immersive social VR spaces, you never hear your own footsteps. And I never realized how important those footsteps were until I started working on the Blind Burner project. And they were like, well, can't we just incorporate footsteps? I'm like, oh. Like that was a major light bulb moment. And not everyone needs to hear my footsteps. I'm the only person that needs to hear it so that I know that I'm moving. You know, sometimes there's a little speech bubble that comes up over your head in AltSpace. And I found it annoying because I didn't want it in the pictures. But sometimes I'm talking, but the other person can't hear me because there's something wrong with my audio, but the speech bubble will come up. Or maybe something's wrong with their speaker and they can't hear me, but they know I'm talking. So it was like this little cue thing that was super helpful. Little things like that we just don't think about. So once we start getting more senses, smell, there's a company called OVR, olfactory virtual reality, that's really working on bringing smell to VR. It's a little box that attaches to your VR headset, not publicly available yet, but you are a educational institution, so you could probably get your hands on some. And it's really interesting how they mix smell. They compare it to music. Smell has a certain number of notes. Music has a certain number of notes. There's a scale. In music, there's a scale in sound, and they're using a program like Premiere to mix the sounds, mix the smells, and then the smells end up, the chords of the smells end up going directly to your nostrils as just like a little fog, and you get the sense of smell. So we captured the sense of smell. We captured the smell of the playa dust at Burning Man, and we're going to be incorporating that into our final experience. And same with OWO. So OWO, OWO. Haptics are great. OWO is better, or like the Tesla suit, which is way too expensive. But having electrodes ignite your nerves in the same way it would to send the signal to say, I'm cold, I'm hot, the wind is blowing on my skin, I can feel a percussion. Like if there's a gigantic explosion, like when the man explodes at Burning Man, and you feel the heat and the explosion, or when Diplo is going off and you hear the boom, boom, boom. You want to feel that, and haptics doesn't really do it. Haptics is like a vibration telling you that there's a thing that you should be feeling, but it doesn't translate the feeling. And these little electrode things, they translate the feeling into your nervous system. So I find that fascinating. So we're also going to integrate OWO into our final experience of the immersive documentary experience.
Cool. So, hey, there were a couple of hands in the class, right? That was questions. So.
I see somebody running around the room. It's like musical chairs.
She would just do this camera.
Yeah, I think we have to use the laptop mic, so we're getting
Oh,
close.
I understand.
So.
Not a problem.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name's Phil. So I actually had the pleasure of checking out the virtual burn before I actually met with Doug and actually talked about like checking out the space. But it was really sad kind of hearing the alt space closing because it was one of the more unique spaces, because I know that VR chat wasn't used because it's a much more closed program, so you can't actually build and kind of develop the full experience and record. There's like some legal issue. Have you been exploring like other, it's kind of a two-part question. Have you been exploring other platforms that you're interested in kind of going towards, or are you thinking of developing your own, or kind of what direction is that? Because I know like the other big companies that exist, like the Meta Horizons, that is empty and not very big. Like, are you looking for like, so places that will be able to support you fully, or are you thinking of maybe developing out something there? And kind of the second part to it is, like we talked about realism and avatars, but there's like a point to like hyper realism. And have you experimented much with using like metahumans as, or equivalences as avatars? And is there a benefit or a detriment to using something that's so hyper real that we can now notice all the imperfections?
Whew, okay, those are two gigantic questions. So the first one is, where are we going? And that's like the big, I was here at South by, everybody was like, oh, my condolences. So what's next? It was like the number one question everybody asked. So thank you for your condolences. Where are we going next? So we're building the BRCvr immersive documentary experience is where we're going to live. Ultimately, it'll be a standalone app that people will be able to come to on, and that will be in and of itself its own experience. It will be curated for probably a while, and then we'll open it up for community. And for a while, I mean like probably a couple of years. It's going to take us a while to really build it out, but we've decided to do this for a couple of reasons. One, principles of Burning Man. Altspace was as close as you could get to fulfilling the principles of Burning Man and creating the safe space. But that's, you know, because Gavin and Eric and Brian, I think is the third guy's name, Greg, I think Brian, they're burners, and they built community standards. The other platforms don't have community standards. And I highly recommend all platforms. You're going to be building community. If you're going to be immersive social VR, you have a set of community standards, put them on your website, and have people understand that these are the standards of the community of this platform. VR Chat doesn't have it. Horizon doesn't have it. Rec Room doesn't have it. I've looked. I read the TOS and the TOS, and most of the time they're horrible. I loved the terms of service for Altspace because it basically said everything you upload is yours. And but we can do whatever we want with it because you're on our servers. We need to move the stuff around, but we don't own it. You own the IP of your art. And I just thought that was exceptional. I just was blown away that that was the terms of service of this platform of creatives. If you build something on Horizons with their tools, they own it. They own it. You don't own it. And I'm like, and you can't upload your Unity file. So you have to build with their tools. So all this effort that's going in doesn't belong to you, doesn't belong to the creator, including your avatar, including your identity. So responsibility to creators is something that's really needs to be addressed on these platforms, and that's something that we're going to do on ours. So we have gifting and decommodification as two of our principles, and we have always had BRCvr be a gift to the community. The new version, we're going to have to make subscription based unless some philanthropic burner is like, no, I don't want that. But we have to pay for server space. We have to pay for, you know, there's subscriptions, and there's just hard costs to keep the lights on. So we're going to figure out exactly what those hard costs are, and then figure out exactly what that price point needs to be in order to keep the lights on. I mean, you go to Burning Man and you have to buy a ticket. The ticket keeps the event going. So it's sort of along those same lines. And then to your second point about hyper realistic. So we need to put better permissions and protections in place before we put hyper realistic people into a digital space. It would be too easy to steal somebody's identity and pretend like you're Keanu Reeves running around on a platform because you were able to steal his digital model. I think that NFTs are actually a really good vehicle because they're authentication of ownership, to use them as your authentication of your data fingerprint. Your data is your DNA in a digital space. Your data is very unique to you. If we are able to have our data and have our key, our NFT key to our data, and attach that to our avatar, then we will be able to secure who we are in this space. But I personally, I mean, I love myself and I want to be myself in the metaverse, but I also want the option to be whatever character I want to radically express myself as. And that isn't necessarily a scan of myself. I have scanned myself. I have a little, somewhere in this room, I have a little me that I had 3D printed. I got scanned. We scanned 350 burners at Burning Man with the idea that they were basically going to be crowd, so that we could have burners in the space so you don't feel so alone. But ultimately, in time, we would love to scan people, and then here's the NFT of who you are, and you can use that to put it wherever you want, or upload it to Ready Player Me and have that be your authentication of who you are. Right now in the digital spaces, everyone looks like Uncanny Valley when you upload a real person. It doesn't match up. The eyes are just slightly too high. Your eyes are technically dead center in your face. Your nose isn't the center of your face. Your eyes are. The rule of thirds, like we have all these proportion things, and it's just so wrong in the digital space. Like we have all this science of how we're supposed to look, and nobody is really doing it in the digital space. Also, by the way, hardware is a problem. 20 million Oculus headsets have been sold, according to Meta. But you can't put a meta-human, which is technically the term for Epic and what they're doing. You can't put a meta-human into a Oculus headset because it won't render that many polygons. So we'll get there. Pixel streaming, once we get into cloud computing, which will require quantum computing.
There's an interesting piece when we talk about these hyper-realistic avatars and so on. What is interesting to me, what you explained when Outspace went down, is that you weren't so much worried about the spaces and so on. The one thing you were worried about, the identity, the way that your avatar appears there. And a lot of, I mean, all of these Web3 conversations all about bringing your identity to different places, but it is so confused. What that does actually mean? What is the identity? Because nobody really describes in this whole Web3 vision, what exactly is the identity that we want to bring everywhere? And here you are experiencing that really clearly, or expressing it very clearly what it means to you and to get to these places. So I think our next speaker, what Timo and his Ready Player Me team are doing, probably really hits the nail there for what you're now missing. And so that's maybe one aspect. The other aspect is the stability of communities, right? And you're building up a new community. How do you think, I mean, it's an old-fashioned thing when we now think through all this blockchain stuff, but how do you think about Creative Commons and open source and building platforms that everyone can set up anywhere and kind of, you know, helping you to not fall into the Outspace trap again, but maybe also other communities?
Interoperability. There isn't going to be one platform. There's not going to be one victor. It's just not going to happen. I've toured over 30 platforms because everybody wants us to bring the Burning Man community, the burners, to their platform. That's a lot of people. And it's a growing community. And I get it, you know, but there isn't going to be one. I've been toying with the idea because now we have worlds, some of our BRCvr worlds on VR chat, on spatial, on Engage, because we're uploading worlds and we're testing it. We're seeing the event production tools and the friending tools and the community gathering tools. And we're like, is this going to work for this? And we have lots of clients too. You know, Microsoft was a client, SES, and we have like all these clients. We have all these worlds that have use cases. So we're also like, well, this will work better here, and this needs to be WebXR, and this needs to be this, and this. So we're figuring all that out, but in the process, we're building this thing ourselves that is this immersive documentary experience that has all these elements that we need. What I would love to do, and this is my own personal future trip, is how do I make a bridge from what we created to Engage and back? How do we make a bridge to VR chat and back? Can I go from my world in VR chat to my app? Can somebody go from my app to VR chat? How do we API this shit together? What do we need to do? I've asked that question in the Metaverse Standards Forum. I asked that question in the XR Guild. I'm like, how do we do this? It doesn't make sense for there to be one platform. All 30 of these platforms I've looked at all have great things that they're doing, and they're all doing something just a little different. I don't think there needs to be one. I think there needs to be bridges. And the bridges is what's going to make us whole. And then we'll have the metaverse. And when it comes to Web3 is the commerce pocket. You know, we have Web 2, we have the internet. The internet is not Web 2, and Web 2 is the commerce pocket of the internet. So Web 3 is how we do these transactions. But the metaverse can be just this open creative space where we socialize and get together. So I think that bridges is how we do this. But I don't know how we do it.
And to build those bridges, you need to actually go a layer lower on the stack. You have to go on the operation system layer and have an operation system for the metaverse and the experience on top. So that's my little pitch there.
Yes,
different.
you're right.
Different
You're
story.
right.
I think we have maybe one last question in the room, and then I think we're over with the time.
Thank you, Athena.
Thanks.
I've got a quick question. I'm Joe, one of the co-structors
Joe.
in the class with Valentin and Hiroshi. Great talk, really enjoyed it. And yeah, the perspective on identity and appearance has got so many different facets. It's fascinating. And your examples struck many chords, but one of them was your talk about uniforms in a way, right? Where everyone's kind of able to wear the same thing or look similar to have affinity to a group. And I kind of, that goes in a couple directions, but we in the physical world back in, I think it was the 90s, we just still have these big meetings here at the Media Lab where all of our member companies come and our colleagues come, and you got CEOs of major companies and you got students, and there's a clear kind of pecking order through appearance to some extent. But for one of them, we all wore lab coats. So we gave everybody a lab coat. And suddenly it didn't matter who you were, everybody was equally approachable because we looked the same. I understood MAS suits for the first time. I mean, there is an ideal there where everyone should be the same. And, if you are wearing the same thing, it kind of happens. So what kind of effects did you see in terms of approachability when everybody's wearing the same thing? And also the bigger question is, how does your avatar affect your behavior? Is there anything that feeds into that?
So
Thanks.
we have an instinct. We have like this, it's what builds tribe. It's like me, not like me. The instinct, we immediately look, and it's down the back of the head. It's super deep. It's part of our survival. We look at somebody, we say, like me, not like me, immediately. Like, is this safe? Is this safe? Is this person going to save me from the tiger? Are we going to band together and survive whatever we need to? And I get it. It made us like survive to this point on this planet, to this, we're great. We don't need it anymore. And when you're in a virtual space, it goes away. Like that little trigger of like, I'm safe, I'm in my own home. So that worry's gone. And whether this person is like me or not like me is also gone. And I see people just pop into a virtual space and immediately walk up to somebody they don't know and start talking or listening or getting involved in a conversation. It's a lot easier and more fluid in virtual spaces, in my observation, than I have seen in physical spaces. I'm here at South by. I go into a meeting or a meetup or a lounge, and people self-segregate out of comfort. Out of comfort. You see the girls. I went to a tech meetup. All the women found each other. Because we're so used to it being male dominated. We're so used to having to find each other for a sense of safety. It's not like my being, I'm not really worried about my safety, but it's an instinct that's gone awry. And so your experiment with the lab coats proves that. And so on AltSpace, you had a set of just parameters: body shape, hairstyle, eye shape, whatever. It was just body parameters. And you could be whatever you want within these parameters. So we all looked of the same species, but you could have purple skin, you could have green skin. What's really funny is I did notice I wore purple skin for a while because I love purple. And I found that people that had purple skin gravitated towards me because I was purple too, and we were all going to be purple together. So I changed my skin tone back to a more natural thing, and then I added purple hair. And then I got those purple people gravitating towards me, as well as people who were into purple because I had skin that had them feel like there was a sense of normalcy. I have a friend of mine that experimented and changed his skin tone to black to see what it was like to be a black person for a while in the metaverse. And he had some really interesting observations of going to where he normally went, which he didn't occur to him was around people that identified more with white, and how they didn't naturally go up and talk to him. As
So
much
Sydney,
as,
Yeah, signaling theory plays a real role in virtual
Mhm.
space, but you can configure it, you can craft it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to play with and experiment with. So that's why I say, like, we need to stop making these socio-normative avatars. It's nice that I can like click female or click male, but what I really liked about AltSpace is that all I had to do was choose a body type. And if my body type had a thin waist and hips, so be it. You know, I can make myself look feminine, but I don't have to be female. And and I really like that. And to answer the question that was up there, I actually have no idea if anybody was offended that he was posing as Black, but since you could be any skin color you absolutely want to be, I don't know that anybody would have been posing as, but that's a super interesting question. Jeremy Bailenson at the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford, they just released a paper recently about avatar embodiment that was very fascinating. And they're doing a lot of research right now. There's a PhD student there that's spearheading it on identity and avatar embodiment and your sense of presence and what does it mean, and being male when you're female, being female when you're male. There was a project at South by that actually just won the grand jury prize that was called Mind of Body, I think, where you start out being the opposite gender of what you are, and you sort of design out your state of being and what goes on in the body. If you're male, you get to find out what's going on in your body. If you were female, what it feels like to actually have a period. I find hilarious. But anyway, that's we're playing with it now. Like, we're in the playground right now. We're in this great play space, and I love it. I love the fact that all eyes are off Metaverse. Like, the whole fad and buzzword is not dead, but it's not as all eyes on us, and now we just get to play.
Yeah. We know Jeremy pretty well here, and his work is wonderful. He's come visit us many times. And I think it's great that we don't yet know what the social protocols are going to be. I mean, some have evolved in, Second Life and others, but it's still a Wild West. And what's going to settle out to be acceptable is intriguing. So
yeah, what I've seen in VR chat is people that they all sort of hunker together, and people that are humanoid hunker together, and people that are furries hunker together. So I've noticed this sort of self-segregation. That I have a friend of mine who's a stick of butter as the avatar. But people self-segregate. And so I like it when there's more similarity so that we have a sense of tribe within the platform.
Great.
But individual. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. This has been very fascinating.
It's been
Thank
great
you.
to have you.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you very much.